Welcome to another episode, Pound for Pound Box Report, episode 226. Sorry for the late start. Had some issues on my end, technical issues on my end. I'm your host, Michael. Joining me this week, Gail from Communities Digital News, Daniel from the Inscriber. What's going on, lady and gent?
Hey, as they
Hello.
say, starting late, sounding great.
Yeah, and a lot to talk about. A lot to talk about. For those who are new, Pound for Pound Box Report, Pound for Pound Box Report, live YouTube show, as well as podcast and blog discussing all things boxing. The motto is, when boxing is good, we will talk about it. When it's bad, we will talk about it. Bottom line is, if it concerns the sweet science, we will talk about it. If you want to find out all information regarding Pound for Pound Box Report, blog page, the place to go to, P4P Boxer Report. .wordpress.com. That's the link. Check the right of the page for the links to all of our channels and pages on social media, Facebook, YouTube, G Plus, you know the deal, as well as links to where to listen to the show on all available platforms that carry podcasts, minus Spotify, iTunes, the Google Play Music, Stitcher Radio, all the like. Let's get things going. Recapping what went down this past weekend. Starting with the big battle of the weekend, Terence Crawford making the first title defense of his WBO welterweight belt in his hometown of Omaha. Grudge match against Jose Benavidez. Crawford scoring a 12th round stoppage. Stopped him, I believe, in the last 30 seconds of the fight. I'll go to you, Gail. Crawford, he got the win. Benavidez was competitive. As a matter of fact, it can be argued, and it was argued on the night on boxing Twitter by some that Benavidez kind of exposed a bit of a flaw in Crawford, and that is he was able to be countered. What the thing that I noted was Crawford. He had some issues getting to Benavidez because of his height and his length, but one of the things that you notice about that's underrated about Crawford, not just his ability to think, but his corner work. First half of the bout, this fight was very close. 4-2. Some would argue it was even after six, but you can see slowly but surely Crawford and Crawford, as well as his corner, uh, they found ways to get to Benavidez. They couldn't get in necessarily with the straight shots, but they found ways to get around the guard, around the reach of Benavidez, going hooks to the body here, one side, hooks to the body to the other side. I remember at one point, corner instruction was telling Crawford to not just single jab, but double and triple jab. Crawford began to employ that strategy, and slowly but surely, Crawford started to get to Benavidez with shots, with hard shots, until he eventually was able to hurt him. And the way that he finished Benavidez once he got hurt, world class.
Absolutely world class. That's the way to close the show. You know, starting from the end of this fight. If you were watching on ESPN, you heard his trainer Brian McIntyre tell Crawford before the 12th round, "Play it safe. You got this. Play it safe." Well, Bud had his own ideas. He wanted to make a statement. This is only his second welterweight fight. Think about that. This is only his second fight in this very competitive division. And he wants to put his stamp on it. And by God, he did. He caught Benavidez with a right uppercut, wicked right uppercut. And even then, he could have let that go and be enough. It was with 30 seconds left in the round. But no, he closed the show. He poured on the punishment until Celestino Ruiz, the referee, was forced to stop the fight with 12 seconds left in the fight. And Crawford later said he'd been seeing that punch. He'd been seeing that punch rounds and rounds ahead of time. And when he got tired and he was leaning more and more, he meaning Benavidez, because he had worn him out with the body work, another theme in this show, in this fight. He'd worn him out. Benavidez starting to run out of gas. He threw the shot and it landed. And if you heard his mother, who's quite a piece of work, Deborah, after the fight, she said, "Well, it took you too long, but good job. Only your mom can talk to you like that." but it was very early, or even early on. Benavidez got off to a very good start. All due credit to him. That jab was working. He knew it. He was landing combinations behind it. But Crawford didn't panic. He was patient. He didn't just, throw the game plan out because things weren't working early. He stayed in there, kept his distance, was careful, which was allowing Benavidez to prevail in some of the early rounds. But he was figuring out how to take him apart. And then he shifted to southpaw in the second round, and he mostly stayed there. And he kept working on the distance and the timing. And he took his time. Everything that had gone on during the week, all the nonsense, all the trash talk, he knew that Benavidez wanted to try to make it a firefight, and he didn't go there. He knew that once he, unlocked the puzzle, got into a rhythm, he could do what he needed to do, and that's exactly what he did. Benavidez made him work hard in the early rounds. And once he figured it out and got his distance, the patience paid off. And the CompuBox numbers in a fight don't always tell the story, but in this case, they did. Because after 3 rounds, they were dead even. I mean, they were dead even to a punch of power punches landed. But Crawford started pulling away. And once you saw the stats, 6 rounds in, 8 rounds in, 10 rounds in, I mean, literally the percentage and the number of punches were starting to widen in Crawford's favor up until they went from being even after the first few rounds of the fight, close to being even, with Crawford finally having a slight edge halfway through, to the end, where you had Crawford landing 188 total punches in the fight to 92 for Benavidez once they got to the 12th round. He doubled the number of landed punches after the two had nearly been even in the first 3 or 4 rounds. That's how fast and far Crawford pulled away. That tells you exactly how the fight went down. Great, great performance. After the fight, Benavidez said, well, part of the reason was my leg. Remember that Benavidez had been shot through the top of the knee, 18 months ago. He had a wrap on it, and he admitted later that it affected him. He said it started hurting him. He started looking very flat-footed in the ring, and it was commented on during the fight. He said by the 9th round, it hurt pretty bad. He didn't use it as an excuse, but it obviously affected him. So there's a lot of questions to be answered about Benavidez going forward due to that injury. With more rehab, can he overcome that? Or is this something that he's now going to live with? That's something we're all going to have to watch. Great fight. And Crawford's killer instinct serves him so well, delivering up that last round stoppage. Talking about a drama show, it just doesn't get better than that.
I'll go to you, Daniel. Your impressions of the fight. Were you surprised that Benavidez was able to have some success early? How impressed were you in the way in which Crawford and his corner were able to adjust? Your overall thoughts?
Looking back at the fight, there was a reason why Jose Benavidez was undefeated up to that night. I remember he was getting that under the tutelage of Top Rank. It wasn't like a PBC undefeated in a way. But he showed that he can use the intangible that he has. He has his height, he has his reach, and he showed that he can use it pretty well. And he did counter off Bud a little bit. Now, part of it is Benavidez did in the first half of the fight probably what Victor Posto should have done in the first half of the fight. Try to counter more with Bud when they fought for the unified 140-pound championship. The problem is, though, I've always been a proponent of attacks to the body if you're going to be a fighter. And Benavidez spent way too many times when Crawford was able to adjust and get the combinations going to try to sugar it off, try to show that machismo. Trying to tell Crawford, you're not hurting me. By making Crawford miss some headshots or have some headshots blocked, but leaving the body completely open. And it did catch on in that fight. Like you saw, a little bit more winded in the second half of the fight. Some of the counters that Benavidez was throwing, they weren't as crisp. They didn't have the pop that they would have had the first half of the fight. And eventually the body attack wore down. You saw it in that 12th round. And now, granted, it was a punch that Bud didn't throw the whole fight until then. In that right uppercut. But you knew at a certain point he was done. And the referee stopped it at the right time. And Benavidez, he did mention the knee. And ESPN made it a point to mention the knee that, for example, that the doctors told him he would never box again, or that it would take up to 2 years just for the knee to feel normal again, let alone get back into training. So it was a good showing of Benavidez, but once Bud figures you out, he figures you out. Now, what this may show in Bud actually, because this was his second fight at welterweight, and it took up to the 12th round for him to get the result he wanted, maybe it's going to take a bit for his power to catch up to 147. Because he was able to hurt cats at 140. But at 147, you saw with Horn. Now, Horn's a pretty big welterweight. He wasn't really able to hurt him or knock him down as easily as he did. And it took 12 rounds to knock down Benavidez. So it may show that Bud is starting to adjust, and his power is going to have to adjust to this new weight division. But it was a good statement made. There was no bad blood afterwards. And if anything, this is one of the fights that Bud wins, but the way that Benavidez went throughout the fight, he winds up a winner too in many ways.
I don't know about that thing regarding power because, as you said, when he won the title, Horn was a big guy, and as you know, if
Mike, I think we lost you.
Oh, you lost me?
Yeah, you stopped at the Jeff Horn part.
Okay. This right here. Wow, I'll fix my mic. Horn is a big guy, and Benavidez is a big guy too. He looks like he can easily fight at 154 pounds. So I don't have as much questions about Bud's power because he was still able to hurt these guys. If he wasn't able to hurt these guys at all and stop them, it would be cause for pause for me. And as you said, he's still filling out the division. He's still growing into welterweight. So I'm not as concerned with that. But the thing for me with Bud is the fact that he's still able to bring some power into the weight while he's adjusting to fighting at a higher weight. I think the power may well increase. And as I've said about Bud, he's basically been a junior welterweight all along. Even before he won the title, he fought as high as 143 pounds. So he's always, even as he was a lightweight, he was a guy who was coming down in weight. Let's move on to the future here. Of course, all the talk afterwards was about a possibility of a Crawford-Spence match. Crawford-Spence. Spence alluded to it on Twitter. So did Crawford. Now, Bob Arum, after the fight, gave the impression that he wants this fight next. It could be made easily. I think I read something, I think maybe on Boxing Scene, as he said he could make the fight in 3 hours, supposedly. The question to both of you is, are we to take this talk seriously from Arum about how A, he wants to fight with Spence next, and B, that the fight can be made so easily.
Nah, not now, not right away. There are too many players that Crawford can potentially fight, and guys that Spence need to work through. And legitimately, it is only Crawford's second fight at welterweight, albeit, already he seems that exactly the same form he was at 140 that he is at 147. But those two guys need too much to their respective promoters to tangle with each other and saddle one of them with a loss. So that's not going to happen. They're going to have to circle around each other while they're picking off the rest of the guys. And, where is once upon a time Keith Thurman? Where the hell? Technically, he is still the man at the top of the division, but he's off on a mountain playing a flute somewhere. What's going on? One or the other of this pairing of Crawford or Spence are going to have to fight Thurman first. And once that happens, and assuming one or the other is successful, that's when you're going to see Crawford and Spence. Or Thurman beats Spence, Thurman beats Crawford. You're going to see Thurman and fill in the blank. But that to me is the pivot point first. But it all depends on what in the world is going on with Keith Thurman. So I ask you, gentlemen, what the hell is going on with Keith Thurman?
He's on a milk carton somewhere. Folks asking, where have you last seen April 2017? That's where he's at.
Ding, 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 ding.
It's gone past the milk carton, Mike. This is an Amber Alert at this point.
Please, anyone in the chat room, if you know the whereabouts of Keith Thurman, we're calling on you right now. Where the hell is Keith Thurman? When we last left Keith Thurman, he was the welterweight, #1, pound for pound welterweight champion in the division. And crickets. Crawford has come on the scene. Spence is on the rise. They have a bunch of lesser opponents floating around, and they can make time with them. They can make time with the Sean Porters and the Danny Garcias and, a couple other guys. But it's Thurman who needs to determine who's eventually going to be at the top of the mountain, with or without a flute. So, chat room, please check in.
I mean, listen, if Fury can finally get back in the ring after a 2.5-year layoff, Thurman, he should be in the ring by now. So, and until then, to me, he's irrelevant. I don't think really of him. So to me, he's not even worth discussing. How can you discuss it? How can we talk about someone who hasn't been in the ring?
You're absolutely right. But listen to us saying this about Keith Thurman. Wind the clock back not that far and imagine us saying this. It wouldn't have happened.
I mean, you say Amber Alert. Amber Alert, someone you want to find. I'm not even looking to find him. I don't care. I don't care.
Oh, geez.
Oh my God.
I do not care.
And that's true. That absolutely is true. I can't contradict that. And I'm sad to say that. That's what the hell happened. It's one thing for a guy to get a beat down or have problems outside of the ring. Well, neither of those are the case with Thurman. He just seems to be too happy or too uninterested to fight. I don't get it. Come back for one last paycheck and call it a career. Maybe he isn't even motivated to do that because he doesn't want to take the beat down it would potentially take, or the loss, maybe just a simple loss that would occur. But it's just a head scratcher.
Your thoughts, Daniel?
as far as the future, like I said, me, Joe, and Francis, we discussed this last night. Bob Arum is kind of poking the bear a little bit because not only did he try to say this fight is easy, he declared Al Heyman a fictional character, also pretty much almost at the same time. I think his quotes were, "Have you seen Al Heyman? I haven't talked to him in 3 years." I think at this point, Al Heyman is a character that Sam Watson made up. He's poking the bear a little bit, trying to show Crawford that I'm doing good, but Gail's right in that sense. They're not going to make the fight. Not anytime soon. Because they'll not only are they going to throw like the whole Heyman top ranking, they're going to throw probably the Showtime ESPN thing. People say like, oh, now no, Crawford's for ESPN. We can't do that. Even though ESPN as a network has come out and said, we will not stop a good fight from happening. Because with ESPN, obviously with ABC and Disney, they don't have to. They don't have to really focus on getting a lot of boxing fights because that's not their main bread and butter with ESPN. The bread and butter of ESPN is sports centers, the NFL is the NBA, NHL, and it's increasingly now English Premier League, MLS. So they have a whole lot more on their plate that they can focus on where they're not going to be the ones to blame into it. They'll be fine. Go ahead, make the fight. But obviously, they're not going to make it a fine time. And there's enough contenders around them where they don't have to make the fight. So, and was it?
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, and I think Bud understands that because when they asked him the question, remember, he didn't name any names. He said, "I'm ready for everybody, and whoever top rank lines up, I'll fight."
Okay, I'll go to you, Gus. You just now joining us, Gus from Corruption in Boxing. Your quick recap of Terence Crawford, his stoppage win over Jose Benavidez.
Hey, Mike, Gail, Daniel.
Evening,
to me, Mike, it was a bit of an infuriating display. The fight was absurd in the first place. Jose Benavidez clearly had no jurisdiction being in the ring, as he's never really displayed any performance of any note at any time. But we know how Top Rank operate, and they can inject some sort of manufactured bad blood between the two fighters to try and promote it. But it's something Bob Top Rank has been, constructing for many years. We know how and more, promoters are doing that as well. So the in-house fights. But if you recall the Victor Postol and Terence Crawford fight when we discussed it here, and I remember Dill was on there as well, and I mentioned that it was one of the worst fights I'd ever seen. And there's elements of that fight which transpired in this fight. And to me, it just emphasizes that Terence Crawford, contrary to all of the wider perception, does not have a 360-degree game. People are very easily hypnotized by his skill, but they don't pay enough attention to the deficiencies, and they're clearly there, and I'll explain. I think on the front foot, he's not as good as what people think. At times, he can be a little bit flat-footed. If you look at the direction in which he comes into range, and he's a fighter who's more than happy just to sit outside range, that's where he wants to be. And that is the type of jab that he designs so that a fighter doesn't come too near. It's quite a safety-first type of approach. But once he comes in, he'll only fire, and I had to go back and have a look at a number of fights. There's only sort of 2 or 3 punches that he fires, a jab, sort of left hand to the body and the right before he breaks range, and he does that all of the time. He doesn't have the capacity to sort of trade and engage, and that's exactly what he really should have done with Benavidez, a much taller fighter. he had the reach advantage, but more than anything, he had the power and strength advantage as well. The fact that Benavidez was severely hampered by two main factors. Number one, stamina, and number two, his mobility. And if you recall, it was a question I asked Gal last week about his shooting, because I thought there's no way from, you know, a shattering injury, like particularly your patella or your kneecap, something like that, that you can recover. I've suffered a broken kneecap, Mike, when I used to play cricket back in the day. And I can tell you now, your mobility does not recover. So I was skeptical coming into the fight. You know, Terence really, you know, a clinical fighter would have engaged with Benavidez on the inside, like Victor Postol, and taken them out. But he conforms to you know, the same structure of his fights in terms of slowly breaking them down. We know that. And another thing, you know, Benavidez was having early success because of another major deficiency with Crawford. Whenever he's breaking range, if you look at the position of his hands, he goes into that cross guard position, so his chin is very much in the air. And Benavidez was able to land that right hand at will, just when Crawford is not even really shifting to the side, but when he's sort of exiting range after, you know, landing a free combination, and he won't engage any more than that. So he's very conscious of sort of coming in and out, because I'm not sure whether he knows his chin can handle it, but certainly he took some right hands and they were snapping his neck back. You could clearly see that. So Benavidez was able to persevere as long as he had, you know, the stamina to do so. After that, he didn't really want to move. He wanted Crawford more to come to him, because he quite clearly didn't have the stamina. And plus, now Crawford was targeting his body as well. So I guess that almost exacerbated, you know, his fatigue, but all that inactivity and, you know, lack of desire, motivation, and ambition. You know, I thought Benavidez, you know, just didn't really have anything, but he was having a great deal of early success. Now, if there was more of a proficient sharpshooter that could step in whenever Crawford broke range, that's when I think he'll be in trouble, rather than, you know, those flat-footed fighters who pretty much stand stationary and don't do anything. Pot shot from long range, but that's it. Somebody like Spence, who does step in and he's very clever in the way he does it, you'll give him tremendous problems, Mike.
Okay, different take here in terms of Crawford's performance. I'm going to open up the discussion here. Reaction to what Gus said, his view of the fight. Agree, disagree. I asked earlier that Boxing Twitter on the night was noting that some flaws in Terence Crawford and that he can be countered. So, thoughts, reaction to what you just heard from Gus, guys.
Well, welcome, first of all, Gus. It's always good to have, you know, the loyal minority here present for the discussion. You know, and we, in our initial review, gave a lot of credit to Crawford, although due credit to Benavidez for starting strongly, but did not let the knee play a large role in our assessment of the fight. Having heard your discussion about that and your personal experience, which counts for a lot, maybe we should, and maybe Benavidez overestimated how big a factor that would be. Whatever we thought of the fight this weekend, going forward, Benavidez is going to have to do some very serious assessment about how much can he rehab, how much will it make a difference over opponents who aren't Terence Crawford. Where does his boxing career go and how much it's affected? And I don't think we'll know until we see him tested again.
For the record, I will say that I do agree with some of your criticisms about Crawford. At times, he does leave his chin up. and he's not as effective going forward as he is going backward. But the thing I will give him credit for is he still showed the ability to just adjust. Fighters who think boxing first, often whenever they presented with a challenge, when they can't get to a guy with straight skills, they don't have a plan B. He showed a plan B in this fight, the ability to get around what Benavidez was doing to him. Um, that he had the awareness to go to the body and to break his guy down. Not a lot of quote unquote boxers or guys who have a boxing mindset don't do that. So while I agree with some of what you said, Gus, I still, for me, there were things that Crawford did in this fight that I have to give him credit for. I'll give to you, Daniel, your reaction to what Gus said, and then I'll go back to you, Gus.
It's a fair assessment. Like I mentioned the knee when I talked about it, and I mentioned how ESPN talked about the knee in a way. Like they said, one doctor said, "You're not going to box again," and then the second opinion said, "Just it'll take 2 years for your knee to feel normal again." Remember, for your knee to feel normal, that's just everyday walking, everyday mobility, let alone training for boxing, which you would think it's a sport that wouldn't take a lot of your knees, but it does, because it requires more than a lot of standing and standing in positions where your body is not really used to standing up. So that's going to play a factor, and that's actually one of the things I forgot to mention when we talk about Benavidez too. While he's big at 147, and he could be size-wise big enough for 144, maybe to take some of the load off of that knee, he might consider going back down to 140.
I don't think he can make the weight.
He would probably have to try, because anything like when that knee is in that type of condition, you're going to try anything to relieve that pressure off. And if you can't, then you have to find a way to really adjust to your game plan, because not everybody is going to do what Bud did. There's going to be some guys that are just going to come and blitz you if they notice there's weaknesses in you. So it's a fair assessment that Gus is making. Like I say, it does play the fight plays into a factor into it. Now, what's going to be determining what goes on in the future is what type of opponents Bud picks. Does he pick an opponent that can counter him the way Benavidez did, to show that it wasn't a fluke or just made him nervous about it? Because if he starts going to another degree of fighters, then his team kind of shows that maybe they don't want to see that again.
Your thoughts, Gus, before we move on.
Mike, look, I've seen enough of Terence Crawford, both amateur and professional. Now, he may be one of the most fluid, ambidextrous fighters since, Marvin Hagler.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, very comfortable like that. But in terms of the development that he had, remember he was one of the most touted amateurs, but it was actually Saddam Ali that spoke his Olympic sort of aspirations. But if you look at his development even back then to now, he still hasn't developed an inside game. And we see what he does against like Jeff Horn, some of the more physical fighters. He'll just smother their work, period. Now, at times, there's nothing wrong with that. It's a tactic that you have to utilize sometimes, agreed. But he can get unstuck against a fighter where he may not be strong enough to, to smother their work. Errol Spence is the obvious person, Keith Thurman as well, Sean Porter, very strong physical fighters. Crawford looks as strong as well, but if you think about it now, Crawford and Errol Spence are pretty much exactly the same size, and they always have been. But Crawford elected to drain himself and participate at 135 pounds where he could pretty much intimidate and bully smaller fighters, but also, let's face it, it was derisory opposition, both at 135 and 140. So it's a completely different story now at 147 pounds, but unfortunately politics is preventing us from seeing those matchups that should have happened a long time ago. You know, hopefully some sort of resolution can happen and we can get those matchups between the PBC, who have all the, have now the residual 3 belts, and Top Rank, which has the solitary WBO. I'm not sure whether it's going to happen, but the sanctioning bodies are not going to order. They're not going to order the fights. It's only going to come down to the fighters and money, for somebody to say, look, okay, fine, and some sort of dispensation from their network for this fight to happen. It's going to get a little bit more complicated, given that Fox are already also in the equation now with Showtime, and I guess pay-per-views are going to be on Fox going forward as well. But in terms of a fighter itself, Mike, now I don't really want to get into the pound-for-pound argument, because I don't really deal with it. Never have done, because I don't think people understand what the true origins and concept of what the pound-for-pound, how it was conceived and what it represents. People tend to confuse resumes with skill, and pound-for-pound was always about skill. Now, if you're talking about skill, yeah, he's right up there. But in terms of a resume that he's constructed thus far, I wouldn't put him and Vasily up there. And the fact that neither Vasily or Crawford have faced a puncher in their prime, like, for example, Okoze Tanaka, who's faced, a guy with 18 knockouts in 18 fights in his prime, and he's beaten him even with a broken eye socket. Unlike Kell Brook, who pussied out, he still persevered and won. So both of them have to face, that sort of level of puncher for me to sort of decide who is the better of the two. But at the moment, I think Vasily is far better than Terence, and I would have him up there. But I still think Alexander Usyk is number 1 pound for pound.
Well, we'll agree to disagree in terms of Crawford. Respect your opinion, but in terms of the pound for pound, that's objective. It's fluid in terms of how it's determined and who's up there. That's always a fluid situation. Usyk is very high up there. I wouldn't put Lomachenko number 1 for me. Bud Crawford is still number 1. Interesting discussion there in terms of Crawford, Benavidez. Let's move on quickly to Shakur Stevenson fighting, quote unquote, his toughest opponent to date, guy by the name of Simion. Stevenson showed something we really hadn't seen from him before, and that is power. He blasted Simion out there in the first round. First person to speak on this, please do. I want to have this discussion, this recap about Stevenson and Simion, short and sweet, because I want to have more of a detailed discussion about the next fight coming up. So whoever wants to talk about Stevenson, his first round stoppage win over Simion, have at it.
Well, it looks like it's going to fall to me. That was the fight that Shakur Stevenson has needed for several fights. A definitive, strong performance, a good knockout, an early knockout. And he benefits from having been seen from a large audience on ESPN who were waiting to see the Crawford fight. So if he was going to time it, he really couldn't have timed it any more perfectly. And I'm not talking about the punch, but the performance. And I hope that's the performance that he needed internally to make him believe to believe his own hype, if you will, to believe that he's got the capacity to be that star that Bob Arum so desperately wants him to be, that he can live up to the hype. It is really hard for these young guys to do that. And it gets to them after they've heard it and heard it and heard it. And they're on their normal learning curve and taking on guys in the professional ranks and realizing, the pros, it's real different than the amateurs. And they all end up finding that out. And my dogs are weighing in and agree. And I was very happy to see it for Stevenson. I think psychically that's going to go a long way for him.
And Stevenson, who's known for having a bit of beef on Twitter, I guess was feeling very super cocky about himself because he, off of that performance, he went on a rant on one Gervonta Davis, basically saying he's handled him in the past. I'm assuming in sparring that he'll handle him again. That carried on to a back and forth talk fest between the two. That was entertaining. So yeah, I got to give Shakur Stevenson credit. Look, his opponent was okay. Sure, he fought some guys, but I always felt all alone that Stevenson would have his way, and he did just that again. And the power was a bit surprising there. Maybe he's finally starting to grow into his man body. I want to move on to second quarterfinal bout of the World Boxing Super Series Bantamweight Tournament. Zolani Tete fought Mikhael, Aloyan. I'm going to you on this one, Gus. Tete scored a 12-round decision win. I've been touting Tete for years. You and I both have, Gus.
Mike, you start this off and I'll go back to back with you because both of us are about as equally frustrated.
Yeah, however, his last two performances, this fight and the Narvaez bout,
yes.
I have to say, I'm disappointed. Tete went from a guy to me who was elite boxer puncher, knew when to be smooth and calculated, but yet effective and aggressive and really destructive when he needs to be, to a guy who's fighting strangely passive.
Exactly.
I don't understand how come he didn't pull the trigger in this bout. He was in there against a guy who didn't have much professional experience. As you watch the fight and you watch video of him, he's a guy, to me, not that hard of a puncher, didn't have many tools in the arsenal, and yet he kept holding back. Jab, 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 move around here, throw a left hand here and there to the head and the body. What was the combinations? Where was the fluidity? Where was the aggression? I don't understand.
Yeah, you're absolutely Mike Knight. It's sort of the sort of depreciation or in his performances almost coincide with when Marlon Tapales failed to make weight and that belt got rescinded and awarded to him when he was fighting. When he was the interim champion, and you can see his performances from that point onward have. I'm not sure whether it's a case of a safety first approach, but you're right. For a freakish athlete at that sort of weight category with his attributes he has, but not only can he win fights from out of range, but I think he's far more effective, as you alluded to, when he actually steps in and he fires. And he does have, or in the past, he did show that he had spiteful combinations at short range. He could, specifically with that right hook, I think 7 or 8 knockdowns, stroke knockouts have been by that right hook, to the rib cage, and it's one of his better tools. But this fight, the styles never gelled from the outside. You could clearly see when you have two southpaw fighters, and both of them were at long range. They were jostling for position and then exploding into range, and then if the first punch didn't land, rather than fighting on the inside, both of them would, clinch and smother each other's work. And it led to 6 or 7 clinches per round. And you could see the referee was getting frustrated. Mikhael was guilty of it early on in the fight, absolutely, for the first half. And apart from that three-piece combination that Zolani landed, where he actually stepped to the side and fired it to prevent Mikhael from jumping in and smothering him, that was a glimpse of what he can do once he puts his punches together. And it's very disappointing that he didn't continue in that vein. One thing I noticed about Teddy, Mike, is, and it's a very bad telegraphic mood that he just seems to replicate over and over again. So he's got a wide stance, obviously at long range, so he's bouncing up and down, he's trying to change his look, but then he goes perfectly still, and then once he's perfectly still, that's when he's going to explode forward with his jab or his straight left hand. And he seems to do that all the time. He doesn't have that ability to fire punches when he's on the move or on the fly, when he's trying to shift to the side, get the lead foot out and then fire a punch. Is when he's almost bouncing up and down on the spot. When he's still, that's when he'll explode in range. And he just kept doing that over and over again. And I was surprised that Mikhael didn't calibrate his counter punch, step back and fire that right hand, which he started doing from round 5 onwards, and he was having success. I think eventually he started to figure him out a little bit, but it was a case of, single punches, but whenever their bodies collided, they would smother work. So it was visually a terrible fight. Disappointing from Zolani. Obviously fortunate that he got, the knockdown in the first place. Some people were arguing that it was a push, but he definitely landed, a free piece. He definitely got away with it against pretty much a novice, over in Russia. But to be fair to the Russian judges, they seem to have scored a lot of the fights. It was a fair. I think two of the fights, I think it was a very fair scorecard. But going forward, he's going to have problems against Rodriguez, and he's going to have problems against Inoue. Absolutely, no doubt.
Yeah, if he fights the way he fought against this guy, absolutely. I'll go to you, Gail and Daniel. Again, I'm a bit flabbergasted at what I saw. Gus is right. The fight was snoozer. And Tete to me was a clinical assassin. One of the most complete fighters in the world. Going from the Paul Butler fight on to his record knockout of Gonya, November last year, I believe it was. These last two fights, I'm not seeing at all what impressed me so much in prior fights.
And very quickly, the two fights that you're talking about, look at the two different methodologies he adopted. With Paul Butler, he counterpunched him to death beautifully. And with Gonya, it was just a beautifully timed shot. So he has multifacets in the way he can take out opposition, but unfortunately, we're no longer seeing it. Sorry,
right. The criticism that you had in terms of Crawford, once he steps forward, he lands just basically the same combinations, and more importantly, that in your estimation, you feel that he's not an effective inside fighter. To me, Tete is an effective inside fighter, coming forward and especially going when fighters come to him and when he comes to a fighter, he can effectively go to the body. I don't understand how he didn't employ that strategy in this fight. I don't understand. You mentioned the Gonya fight. He came in, he stepped around, he caught him he used an angle step to set Gonya up for that record knockout. Where was that creative way of thinking in this fight in terms of his approach to get to Aloyan? I didn't see it. I just didn't see it. I don't want to be a bandwagon fan, but again, I'm frustrated by Narvaez. He can make fighters stink up the joint. Nonito Donaire proved that. So I give him a bit of a pass there. But with this guy, against this guy with this relative experience, Tete, he should have done more. He should have done more.
But against Nevaez, Mike, Tete gauged very quickly that Nevaez didn't have the power to trouble him. Hence, he should have hunted him down and taken him out rather than let him sort of outbox him. The bigger man as well, sort of naturally. I thought that was also a glaring mistake.
Yeah, right. Let's get Daniel and Gales into this discussion. Your reaction from what you saw during Tete's win over Aloyan. Are you as disappointed as Gus and I are?
I absolutely am. I have nothing more to add to the excellent analysis of what happened. It's so disappointing when you know what a fighter is capable of doing and they don't even come close. It is the curse of raised expectations that we have for guys like Tete, who we've been thrilled by, who we can't wait to see again in the ring. When it's a guy that fights in a very methodical, technical manner, who doesn't have that killer instinct or that mean streak, who doesn't pour it on, who doesn't adjust, who stays in their lane, does their thing. We accept it. We don't get too hot and bothered about it. We understand who and what they are and what they represent. But with a guy like this, when he doesn't deliver what we absolutely know he is capable of, it's a much bigger blow in a way when you have those expectations. And if I had talked him up amongst my, somewhat casual fans, wow, here's one of the guys to watch in this series. Oh, I can't wait to see him fight. And they saw this last bout, they'd start to doubt my sanity or my
Forget casual fans. Forget casual fans. I've been talking this way to hardcore heads, and it's like they watch this and it's like, really?
Well, and I did too. He is very lucky that he got an extra point off that flash knockdown. He really, really dodged a bullet. Aloyan gave him a good fight. I think he decided he could play it safe. Perhaps he underestimated his opponent and didn't come in prepared mentally. I think he's always prepared physically, but you've got to have your head in the game and you've got to have a very firm idea of what you want to do. You don't get first round knockouts and beatdowns like he does without visualizing the way the fight is going to go and how you're going to make it go that way. That is just lazy thinking, in my opinion, as to what we saw. Horribly disappointing. The only thing it tells me is Inouye's got this tournament in the bag. I mean, seriously, at this point, he can walk through everybody else in every bracket.
Quickly, your thoughts, Daniel.
I only caught what you can call highlights of the fight because, unfortunately, my work schedule. But yeah, that was not an easy fight to watch. Even if you even watched the whole thing, it's a fight where there was a lot of holding, a lot of smothering, point deductions, but particularly now when it comes to Tete, I said last week that that this is the fight where he has to impress because Inoue set the bar for the tournament. And I don't know if it's playing safe. I don't know if it's like worrisome about the area that you're in, so you had to play it safe. Or maybe like in the way, the frustration, the way he's fighting, and maybe that Tete is falling into the same space that Zurdo actually falls into, where Zurdo fights to the level of his competition. And it creates a frustrating way to watch him fight, particularly when you see what he did on Arthur Abraham, because every single fight afterwards, you tend to look and you just say, oh, he just beat up an old Arthur Abraham. I'm afraid we may get to that point with Zolani Tete if he continues in this route. And I know he's trying to improve. I think he's included Mayweather, Floyd Mayweather Sr. to his camp. But something has to change. Something in the mindset has to change because we know the dog is in there. We know that the guy who can knock people out in an instant is in there. We just have to see if he's going to show up now, whether it's either against Ryan Burnett in the fight that we should have had a year ago or against Donaire. And I'm with Tete on this. I really hope Ryan Burnett wins. I don't want to see Donaire and Tete at this stage because if that's how you're playing it safe with Aloyan, a guy who was 4-0, are you going to play it safe against an Anita Donaire who's old and battle tested?
Before we move on quickly, Daniel mentioned it. After the fight, Tete announced that he's switching trainers, that he's now going to be trained by Mayweather Sr. Gail, Bounce, I hope she can come back. But I'll go to you, Gus. Your reaction to the news that Tete is going to switch trainers and will now be under the guidance of Floyd Mayweather Sr.
I mean, I had no idea about this development.
Yeah, he announced it the day after the fight. Yeah. No, maybe a couple days after the fight. Yeah, I think a couple of days after the fight, he announced that he's going to be trained, that he's moving on. He's going to be trained by Mayweather Sr. The question is, your reaction to that.
It sounds like a knee-jerk reaction, probably some sort of frustration from the performance. And maybe he's sort of implying that that was a strategy sort of calibrated by his coach for him to sort of execute. I don't know, but normally when fighters make that sort of a U-turn straight after a fight, that's what it normally implies. But Floyd Mayweather is more of a defensive sort of practitioner. That was one of the reasons why Ricky Hatton tried to utilize him to try and improve his defense whenever he was trying to come into range where he could work on the inside, because Hatton was getting picked off from the outside, and that was his reasons for that affiliation with Floyd Sr. Now, Tete doesn't really need a coach of that sort of ordinance, in my opinion. He needs somebody more like a Freddie Roach, like an aggressive attacking coach who focuses more on those pivots on the front foot. Where a guy throws a double jab to come into range, picks up his feet, then fires that left to the body, and then he shifts off to the right, following up with a right hook on the exit. That's sort of more of an aggressive approach. That's what he needs. He needs to improve his punch accuracy as well, because his accuracy in this fight was quite well. It wasn't acceptable, in my opinion, for a sort of a high caliber world championship fighter fighting in a prestigious tournament up against the best in the world. Floyd is good on that side. He works those sort of short pads very good. So Floyd Jr. has talked about he does work combinations well, and on the inside his defensive techniques are good as well. But if Zolani is opting to holding as opposed to trying to fight out of a clinch, I don't know, Mike. I guess anything would be better than what he's currently doing at the moment, but I'm not sure how that's going to impact. He's probably going to have to relocate to the States, I presume, yeah?
I'm guessing.
You'll get better sparring over there, so that's not bad. He's got a good management team in the UK now. Frank Warren has spoken about that. So, but yeah, the Floyd he can definitely get better sparring. So that side might be so. Not a bad idea. I think some sort of a change is definitely needed. Floyd Mayweather Sr. doesn't really have a good track record. A lot of his fighters are just being pretty much, got annihilated. We know what happened to Ricky Hatton. So
That was a
much
bad.
for that defensive technique.
That was a bad matchup all along. It can work because Tete at his best has some similarities to Floyd. Can do some of the things that Floyd can do from a skills perspective, and I'm thinking here that if it works right, Tete can be very similar to what we saw from Pretty Boy Floyd, as opposed to Money Mayweather, because there's a difference. Pretty Boy Floyd is a different fighter than Money Mayweather that made all the money. Pretty Boy Floyd was good on the front and back foot. Pretty Boy Floyd was aggressive. Pretty Boy Floyd would take you out when he had the opportunity. Money Mayweather didn't. Floyd Sr., that's the guy who produced Pretty Boy Floyd. Roger is what we saw from Money Mayweather. So I'm thinking, just trying to just go around here, the maze here, and just try to find the light at the end of the tunnel. Because Tete can do some similar things there, he has a high level of skill, that maybe Floyd Sr. can produce something similar to what we saw from Pretty Boy Floyd.
But when you're a veteran fighter, Mike, does a fighter really have that sort of flexibility and to adjust his style so late? So much of boxing we know is muscle memory. I'm not sure whether he can tweak it up a little bit there, but
my counter would be, Gus, and I'll bring Gail and Daniel into this discussion. My counter is the fact that he's willing to change means that he sees something wrong in what he's doing. And because he sees something wrong in what he's doing, he's willing to do something different to perform better in the ring.
Agreed,
because
yeah.
Because the fact that he did change, he decided to change trainers. He himself is frustrated by what he produced in the ring in the last couple of performances. So
inadvertently, he's admitted he has a deficiency at the moment. Yeah, so he's sort of implied it in that way by changing his coach. Yeah, agreed.
Gail, Daniel, your thoughts quickly.
Agreed completely. He needs some kind of shift, and I think the shift needs to be as much mental as anything he can do physically training in the gym. He needs a new approach of some sort, and it seems he's recognized it. That's good news.
Your thoughts, Daniel?
If he was going to do a U.S. trainer, to me, he needs a good mix of both, like brushing out defense and getting better offense. So I wouldn't go so far. I wouldn't go to a Freddie Roach. I would probably lean more to like Robert Garcia or a Joel Diaz. Particularly Joel Diaz.
Yeah, funny. You read my mind. Joel Diaz would have absolutely been my first choice. I completely agree.
Yeah, but either way, you're gonna get better sparring overall than what you're gonna get in the UK in this division, because their top guys they're not gonna spar each other. They're gonna save that for when they actually get fight in the ring. Whereas in the US, just the sheer amount of people, you're gonna have that. Now, what's gonna be interesting when it comes to Tete is how long does it take for him to make the adjustment? Because it takes a while. It takes normally, I think, about 2 to 3 fights for the style that the new trainer wants you to fight to show. And these, obviously, his next 2 fights are in this tournament. And that's a very, very tough test, and particularly depending on who he faces next, whether it is Burnett or it is Donaire. But you could tell something had to be done. I just hope they didn't just go to Floyd Sr. just because they said it's Floyd Sr., it's a name, and it'll get some of the heat off our back from our last performances. Because if that was the case, then you made a wrong decision. Like if you're really trying to fundamentally change, you should probably make to a different trainer. Although I will give you like the point that Floyd Sr. was the one that was training Floyd when he was Pretty Boy, and he became more defensive minded once Roger got involved. But we had to see what it shapes up, because not only going to get when it comes to the training Floyd Sr., you're also going to get what you know of when Floyd Jr. goes into the gym. So he's going to get a lot of knowledge from what he needs to do. It may not be the knowledge that he needs to be an exciting fighter, but it's something that can improve at least.
Yeah, and it's not the first time that a trainer from South Africa has come stateside and sought a prominent, high-profile trainer, whether publicly or privately. I know a lot of fighters from South Africa during the 90s, Welcome Nita most notably, former IBF 122-pound champion. He used to train regularly in the Kronk Gym with Manny Stewart. He also used to train in Texas, sparring with the likes of Orlando Canizales, most notably. So it's not the first time. And so, yeah, Tete's trying to take a similar route, seeking high profile, what he feels is an upgrade in training coming to the United States. Let's move on to some news here. Big news of the week dropped late Tuesday night, really made public Wednesday, and that is Canelo Alvarez. Record deal he signed with DAZN. Eddie Hearn, you got to give him credit, regardless of what you think about him. 5-year, 11-fight deal, $360+ million. I see why now he's fighting Rocky Fielding in December. This was just the setup for that. I'll go to you, Gail. Your reaction to this record deal between Canelo Alvarez and DAZN.
Great move, the right match, the right home, and a great start to DAZN's launch in the United States to get the marquee name fighter of today. And like it or not, that's where Canelo is right now. Canelo himself obviously is a huge draw. Whether he'll get back all that money just on his own, maybe, maybe not. But that would be short-sighted to look at the deal only for Canelo. For years and years, Canelo has been the guy making money for Golden Boy. And he has propped up the rest of their stable. He's, in a lot of ways, provided the platform for Oscar to take a loss on some of these other guys and bring them visibility. He hasn't quite gotten to the point where any of the rest of them are probably doing much more than breaking even for him, but he's got a lot of guys with the potential to get there. Eddie Hearn can use Canelo in the same way. Canelo will draw eyeballs to other guys on the DAZN platform, whether they're on cards with Canelo on the undercard, or whether they're simply on other DAZN cards. Now people have a real reason to become subscribers, to put their eyeballs on the screen, and Canelo's going to become DAZN's loss leader. Whether Hearn and DAZN make back all their money just on Canelo, it almost doesn't matter. He's the seed money to build the whole stable, to get people interested in some of the other guys on the roster, and develop this critical mass. Really, really smart thing to do. Winner all around, and Canelo is a very, very rich young man.
I'm gonna go to you guys again. Like I said, in spite of what you think about Hearn, you got to give him credit for this move. I mean, he already has Joshua signed to DAZN, and now he has Canelo, arguably the two biggest cash cows in the sport, under his banner, under his video streaming service.
All right, I'm going to lay down this bomb now, Mike.
Oh boy!
All right, now, a couple of weeks ago, Oscar De La Hoya conducted an interview with Dan Rafael, in which he stipulated that he was unwilling to sign a co-promotional deal with any third-party promoter on any subsequent network further to HBO, announcing that they wouldn't be pursuing boxing in the future. That has subsequently led to Golden Boy Promotions negotiating directly with Perform Media Group in the UK, and I'm pretty sure that the owner, Leonard Blavatnik of Access Industries in the States, was present in those discussions, as he's pretty much operates Perform Media Group from sort of Feltham and Kensington in London. So contrary to the perception, I believe that this deal has been structured independent of Eddie Hearn, and that's very interesting because when Eddie Hearn announced his affiliation with DAZN, he implied that it was a joint venture between Matchroom Boxing and Perform Media Group UK to create a joint venture company that would operate the application to which Perform Media Group owned the full intellectual property rights in all of the the 6 jurisdictions, and I believe DAZN have authorized and sanctioned the Golden Boy to have their own independent dates, separate to that of Eddie Hearn. And let's sort of analyze why, Mike. Now, ESPN Plus is the major competitor to DAZN, and ESPN Plus obviously launched significantly before, so they've had a head start. And the fact that it's a sort of a well-known brand in the US, so I guess it's inevitable that they now have over 2 million paying subscribers, for a very good application that is, very reasonably priced. DAZN's efforts thus far. Now the figures are unverified, but from a source I have, he's telling me that they have no more than 18,000 subscribers in the United States. Now, given that the first month was a 30-day trial period, that figure is extremely poor, given the pay-per-view that they've had in the UK, broadcasted obviously from Sky Sports, and some of the cards and the one standalone card that they've had in the United States. The ticket sales for that card and the gate receive were extremely poor as well. You could see it was a half-empty place. And the card top to bottom was absolutely atrocious, let's be perfectly honest. So to me, it appears that the owners have realized that the market share of subscribers in terms of boxing in the United States is quite limited, Mike, because boxing has become a niche sport. I could be totally wrong, but I'm guessing that you're talking about no more than 5 million people. That's the maximum pool. So if ESPN are pulling away, DAZN had to alter their business strategy, and I believe they brought in a secondary promoter pretty much to do the heavy lifting to try and revive the fledgling fortunes of DAZN. And you can see why, Mike. Eddie Hearn's strategy in terms of signing fighters, and he made a public spectacle of revealing his cards. Now, he had a short list of vital US fighters and US based fighters that's absolutely pivotal to this sort of application in the USA, given the demographics we know. We're talking about Black and Latino fighters. The Hispanics are the major sort of consumers of boxing. So it was vital that he signed Black and US based fighters. But his endeavors thus far have failed miserably. And you've got to look at the reason why, Mike. Eddie Hearn's strategy in terms of signing fighters is to first publicly humiliate them, belittle them, talk about how much money they've earned thus far, obviously being absolutely poor according to Eddie, and then sort of a clandestine approach in terms of signing the fighter on the side, touting them that we can offer significantly more money. That's pretty much his strategy, Mike. The way he conducts business, even in the UK, telling people that they can go online to company's house, and he basically shows people how they can obtain financial, publicly sort of information of his competitors, like Queensbury Promotions and Frank Warren's company, so people can scrutinize him. That's what he does. He lawns over people with the fact that his company is in that position where they're turning over a profit, and they have nothing significant, but they have a reasonable cash flow, and that strategy has not worked out well in the States. So I think it's very much a case of the owners extremely worried about their fortunes, and they brought in Golden Boy, as I mentioned, to do the heavy lifting, and the fact that they've got their own independent dates, I think, tends to support my theory.
Interesting theory. Interesting reaction. Daniel, your thoughts, and Gil, if you want to react to what Gus said, please do.
It's not a theory. Gus is not telling a theory. It's a fact. Like, if you notice the pattern when it comes to signing fighters to the zone, when it comes to Eddie Hearn, he's always trying to find a way to co-promote. Whether it's with Banner Promotions, with Andrade, whether it's with Yvonne Michel, with Berdaviev, he finds a way to do it now. Signing Canelo, first of all, it's a beautiful move, but again, he wasn't able to do what he did the other fighters. Oscar wouldn't let him. This is a sole venture between Golden Boy and pretty much the zone. Eddie Hearn can hype it up because he's created this thing where he's become the face of the zone in a way, but it's an independent deal. This is mainly something that can make Canelo a whole load of money, and it's apparently a 5-year deal, 2 fights a year, over $300 million. It's a very interesting deal when you look at it. It's a great win for Golden Boy, because guess what? Now that you don't have to focus so much money on trying to pay Canelo into it when it goes to the zone, you can give more freedom for your Golden Boy fighters to focus on ESPN, because they still have that deal with ESPN. And not to mention some of your edge defending fighters that you do put on Facebook watching their Fight Night series. So this is a great deal for Golden Boy. Now, what's going to be interesting watching it, and this is pretty much, I think, one of the subtle things about when it comes to this situation, is Eddie Hearn has been trying to lay the groundwork that Anthony Joshua was the biggest star globally in boxing. Signing Canelo to deal with the zone, even if, like Gus said, it's independent of Eddie Hearn, is an admission that as popular as Joshua is, he's not the most popular guy in the sport. Canelo, for all intents and purposes, is. And it's a way for him to make money. And it's obviously a way for him to up the subscriber counts, because that's the only way you can measure this. You can't measure a streaming service by active people watching. The only people that will do that is the social media networks, whether it's Periscope, whether it's Facebook Watch. When it comes to networks like ESPN Plus, like DAZN, like the WWE Network, they measure their rates by subscribers. And obviously subscribers, it just means you're paying for it. Doesn't mean you're watching it. Now, ESPN Plus is gonna win this battle anyway, because they just offer a lot more. They offer, not only do they offer boxing, they offer football, they offer obviously EPL. They took away the entire 30 for 30 library from Netflix to put it on ESPN Plus. And by the way, it's half the price.
Yeah.
So they're going to win that battle. The problem is the zone now actually has a face that Americans recognize. Right now, their face was Joshua, but the feeling has always been that, Joshua's going to be the face, but we know right now he still fights in the UK.
we as American fans are not going to try to see him live. When you have Canelo Alvarez, or no, we're going to see him live. Like New York fans are going to see him in December. Las Vegas fans are going to see him in Cinco de Mayo weekend and the Mexican Independence Day weekend. So it gives a network and it gives a great face to DAZN in the U.S. market, and it really, really lets them build off of that, because you need to get these fighters involved, and you need to get them good enough cards where it doesn't feel like it's just like what Gus mentioned, like, oh, you weren't winning for money because you weren't making anything, but meanwhile you're fighting in half-empty arenas. That's not a sustainable model. Like Al Heyman has proven that it's barely a sustainable model. You need some influx, you need some star power eventually. So it's a good deal. It is an independent deal from what normally Eddie Hearn has done with DAZN. And if you're Canelo Alvarez's accountant, you are smiling from ear to ear.
So in short, Gail, I guess what Gus and Daniel are trying to say is that, on the surface, it's a win for DAZN, but when you look behind the scenes, this is as much a win for Canelo and Golden Boy as it is for anyone else.
It's possible to have more than one winner outside the boxing ring where somebody has got to win among the two fighters. Everybody can ride from this. Somebody is going to end up taking on the mantle, tarnished as it is, being relinquished by HBO boxing. Somebody is going to get to step into that role. And honestly, I don't think it's Showtime. They've got their own thing going. They're going to stay in their lane. Their identity is well established. Their stable is well established. They've been very successful. That is an if it ain't broke, don't fix it situation. But despite the fall from grace HBO has had, mainly due to their own inattention and budget, what they were capable of is still out there to be taken. And the obvious candidates to step in are either ESPN and ESPN Plus as a tandem, or DAZN. I honestly think DAZN is the one positioned to do it. Now, just because they've got a paltry amount of subscribers now doesn't mean they will have a paltry amount of subscribers 6 months from now. Once everybody is done with HBO boxing in the United States here in a few months, unless they're a Game of Thrones fan, example shown here, they're going to ditch that $14.95 a month they've been paying. If they're still paying it, if they had any excuse to cut the cable, maybe this is it. And what do you know? $14.95. What can a boxing fan do with an extra $14.95 in their pocket every month? $10 to DAZN, $5 to ESPN. Done. That's what's going to happen.
Moving on from the good to, I guess, what could be the bad, if not ridiculous.
Mike, could I just make one more point on that Canelo deal very quickly? Did you notice the way the figures have been structured, that it's slightly more per fight than what Floyd Mayweather, that deal that he signed with Showtime? So it was almost specifically structured in that way, and Floyd must be seething. I thought that was beautiful.
Oh, he is. He kind of is. He's been beefing with Oscar the whole day. So
I'm very glad you mentioned that.
Per fight or something.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It's going to be very interesting. We have a card this weekend in Las Vegas, and Floyd is going to be all up in everybody's grill, sniffing around. Very interesting.
He's so mad that he's prepared to fight Khabib in the cage. Good luck.
Yeah, well, they can keep talking about that until we all get sick and tired of it.
I say, I can understand it, but I say, let it go, Floyd. You made enough money. I mean, $250+ million for McGregor. you shouldn't be jealous or whatever, or salty over nothing. Come on.
You know, Floyd can make himself feel a whole hell of a lot better. All he has to do is drive down the street, walk through a boxing venue anywhere, any weekend in Las Vegas, feel the love, pose for the photos. He'll feel a whole lot better. Someone will comp him a meal and he can go home.
Yeah, right. Like I said, let's go on from what seems to be a good move for all parties, a good thing for boxing, to what's bad and kind of ridiculous in my opinion. Last week, um, at the end of the last episode, we talked about previewing uh, Billy Joe Saunders, Demetrius Andrade. Well, for those who listen to the podcast via iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher Radio, um, you didn't hear this on the you won't hear this on the YouTube thing, but on the SoundCloud and iTunes things, I had a little message at the end that the following day that we did it, the day following the live recording of the last episode, news broke that that the Massachusetts State Athletic Commission is not going to grant a license to Billy Joe Saunders. Saunders subsequently gave up the belt. The fight where Andrade is off. Andrade is fighting this weekend. It just will not be against Billy Joe Saunders. I'll go to you on this first, Gus. Uh, this is a mess. I'm hearing stuff from UK that Billy Joe has gone into a bit of a tailspin as a result of this, with some issues, with some things that he may have done privately that's not being disclosed publicly. What do you make a mess of this? I mean, this is why I said last week, Gus, that in spite of the craziness of Fury, in an odd way, he's more structured and he's more disciplined, because when Fury is fully invested, he may talk crazy, but he don't completely act fool. With Billy Joe Saunders, he's acting fool.
Mike. Look, Billy Joe's stupidity out of the ring is well documented. He's almost like the white Adrian Broner. But in terms of this whole chaotic mess, in the story initially, Mike, but I've sort of sat down and done a bit of research, spoken to a couple of people, had a look at, tried to have a sort of a rational, independent look at the events, and I think the sort of allegations and the test, I think it's absolutely garbage, Mike, and I'll explain why. What was curious to me in this whole event was Victor Conte's presence. Now, does Victor Conte have any credibility? Is the real question. Now, you've only got to go back and look at his involvement in over the past sort of 2 decades, both in baseball, where he was not only designing supplements, but also constructing health plans for a number of high-profile sportsmen, because he's extremely familiar with both sort of USADA, VADA, and WADA's protocols. But he was subsequently, a whistleblower, and a paid whistleblower to the state as well. But in this particular context, now, he obviously had bitterness because he was working for Willie Monroe Pryor, who Billy Joe Saunders beat. And the fact that he was paid by Demetrius Andrade in this particular fight as well. And what's curious is that the contract itself had a clause in which only Matchroom boxes could activate to initiate VADA testing. Both fighters couldn't, specifically due to the cost, and they weren't willing to pay the cost independently. So Matchroom Boxing actually activated the clause, and that Victor Conte personally sponsored the testing financially. And, to me, that has red flags. For Victor Conte to make those bold allegations that it's 20 times. Now, it's an amphetamine stimulant in Section 56 of WADA's prohibited list. Now, oxyliferin is essentially, it's what they call bitter orange, Mike. It's a citrus sort of derivative. but classified as an amphetamine, which initially they were treating people with sort of hypertension, low blood pressure. That's pretty much its sort of origins. Now, it is used in congestion, nasal decongestion, and that is precisely what Billy Joe Saunders in his testimony before he obviously voluntarily rescinded the belt. He mentioned that is how it was that is how it was administered in his body, and the levels that were in his A test suggest that, because oxylifrin, when it's ingested in a capsule form, and that is the way 4 athletes in the past, in which 4 track and field, and I think 1 or 2 cyclists as well, the amounts that they had in their system was around sort of 3-4 milliliters, and that's consistent when it's taken in sort of capsule form. But the amount that Saunders had clearly doesn't resort to what Victor Conte was alluding to, in the fact that it leads to a significant amount of fat burning, oxygenation, strength, building up muscle. To me, that's absolutely nonsense, Mike. It doesn't lead to any of that whatsoever. And I've had somebody who understands drug testing and is a chemist to explain that to me. It's absolutely ridiculous, Mike. And we know that Victor Conte, he's got that's a conflict of interest. He's clearly supporting Demetrius Andrade, so there's no doubt that he's going to come up with those absurd sort of statements, which everybody has pretty much, digested. The fact that UCAD don't consider it, this is the one crucial factor, Mike. Now, oxylifrin is not a licensed drug in the United States, so it is in the United Kingdom. So there was no doubt when Massachusetts was making their ruling that they were going to say, well, there's no way we're going to grant him a license for the fact that that drug is not sanctioned in the United States. So clearly there was going to be a dichotomy between UK UCAD and sort of VADA testing. But WADA and UCAD, don't consider that out of testing it within their protocols. Now that's another discussion for another day. But I'm talking about the substance itself, a stimulant. No, I think it's absolutely bogus, Mike. I think Eddie Hearn has engineered this in one way. Let's talk about it. You've got a Frank Warren fighter fighting on the DAZN application, given the bitterness between the two promoters as it is, fighting a DAZN fighter. And Demetrius Andrade didn't want the fight in the first place, Mike. He talked about it. He wasn't ready for Saunders. I don't think he clearly wanted this fight. I think they've just engineered a way in which to get the belt off Billy Joe Saunders. You've only got to look at who he's fighting at the weekend to say that they're pretty much gifting the belt on a plate to him, and they're lining up a future fight with Canelo Alvarez on the DAZN application, Mike. So I think I don't think there's any veracity in those allegations, Mike.
I'll go to you, Daniel and Gail. Do you share your skepticism over all this, the results, the decision about the Massachusetts Athletics Commission, especially given the presence of one Victor Conte?
Victor Conte is always going to be a controversial figure when it comes to this, because like for the people like that are real good boxing fans but don't pay attention to other sports, Victor Conte equals Balco. Victor Conte equals the baseball steroid scandal. So there's a lot to digest in that area when it comes to who is really trustworthy in that sense. And this was always going to be a different issue, because immediately after the test came out, Billy's team did make it a point to get the UKAD involved and try to tell them, no, this is a substance that's regular. We don't ban it. They got WADA involved, but the problem is, and the problem to me, the fault with that strategy was always that
it's a UK fighter, yes. He's in the UK, but it's outside of the UK's jurisdiction. It was going to be Massachusetts. And by the letter of the law, they did what they technically were supposed to do. Like, okay, this is a banned substance in the United States. We can't do it. Now, from my understanding, though, I thought Billy Joe Saunders was appealing the decision by the WBO to strip of the title. So the Andrade fight was supposed to be for the interim belt. At least I think that's my understanding on it. I could be wrong.
No, he voluntarily rescinded the belt.
Yeah, he voluntarily gave up the belt on his own.
Okay. Well, I think it just shows that in a way, it kind of feels like you can't fight City Hall in that sense then, where you can't really fight a jurisdiction that is not in your. First of all, you're not in your home country. And technically, like I said, by that other country's mentions, it is illegal. It's the same thing where, okay, I'm going to be as blunt as possible with this. Okay, in Amsterdam, prostitution is illegal. Doesn't mean the prostitution is legal everywhere else. So it's the same thing. It's just all about jurisdiction. And they fell into the wrong jurisdiction on it now. Whether Billy Joe Saunders can recover from this, I don't know. I really don't know. Like I said, there's a reason I call him Billy Ho.
Outside of the belt, what does he have going for him?
That's what I mean. Well, that's the whole thing. Like the other thing is that he can latch onto Fury. And they'd probably just do that just based on the traveler culture. And considering that, like I said, his actions when being around Team Fury happened, that may be more of a, not so much a debt, that may be a more of a liability for Team Fury than an asset. So he really only had that belt. And that's pretty to a lot of fighters, unfortunately. There's a lot of fighters that all they have is the belt. And if they lose it, they don't have anything else, like as far as getting them back. And unfortunately, Billy Joe Saunders is now in a position where now on one side he's going to be boxed out by DAZN with the belt he gave up to WBO. He's going to be boxed out by Matchroom of the IPF belt because Daniel Jacobs is fighting for that. And obviously now he's lost by boxed out again by not getting a fight with Canelo. Because now there's really no incentive for Canelo to fight Saunders. None. So it's gonna be tough for Billy unless he can get an immediate fight with the winner of this Andrade fight and he wins the belt back. Yeah, there's not a lot you can say.
Your reaction to all of this, Gail?
I'm trying to generate any sort of emotion whatsoever about this. That's how little I care what the hell happens to Saunders. Honestly, I think I like to spend my boxing brain power on something else. You know, when a guy does it to himself like this, who the hell cares? Can he crawl back? Can he show us anything? Does he have, any sort of capacity to acknowledge mistakes, turn things around, get his shit together? I sincerely doubt it. He deserves the chance to try. I'm not exactly going to sit around waiting for him to do it. And he has no one to blame but the man in the mirror. Once he acknowledges that and embraces that, he has a tiny chance for resurrection. And everyone deserves that tiny chance, but it's tiny. And I don't think there are a whole lot of fans who are going to stick with him until he can prove that he deserves their time, attention, and money. You know, boxing fans work very hard for their money. The way they spend it needs to matter. And right now, he's not worth a dime of their money or their time.
Tell us how you really feel.
You know, it's easy to be honest about that. You know, this guy makes it very easy for all of us. He at least shows us exactly who he is. So if there's credit deserved for that, I guess he gets it.
So he kind of put it on himself in short, and it doesn't hurt, and it doesn't help that he's acted kind of like a jerk throughout the process. That's the gist of I get what you're saying.
You know, Mike. You know, Victor Conte and these officials at Massachusetts and Nevada. They should really, what they should do is venture to the United Kingdom and visit the Winkerbank gym in Sheffield, and try and sort of understand their training approach. Something that Brendan Ingle has advocated, and that Dominic Ingle has subsequently taken the mantra. What they tend to focus on more than anything, Mike, is conditioning, getting a fighter in shape, and hence that was the reason why Frank Warren was pushing for Billy Joe to be assigned to that specific gym. And people assume that Billy Joe Saunders, who in the past has, you know, massively ballooned in between fights, and they were questioning his ability to, you know, make weight and what methods he adopted to achieve those goals, and automatically focusing that it must be due to some external means, perverse means. But they've never been to that gym, and they don't understand. They don't even understand that Saunders had relocated from Hertfordshire to Sheffield, away from his family. He was literally he was forced to live opposite Dominic Ingle, so that they could keep an eye on him, so that he wouldn't distract, he wouldn't take any days off, and that he would be in the gym pretty much every day, 7 days a week. And when he's actually in there, he's a very dedicated trainer, Mike, and those are the testimonies, not just of Brendan, but also all of the fighters there, and a number of sort of UK podcasts were there filming as well during those days. So, you know, people need to understand, everything is about perception. It's very easy to make allegations, but you've got to understand, you've got to look at all of the wider components before you make very damaging, liable statements.
Fair enough. I will concede that, but still.
Actually, I want to raise a point into this, because this kind of reminds me of the Luis Ortiz situation in a way, because it involves medicine in a way. If you've seen what Luis Ortiz had to go through when his mess happened in VADA testing, and once he got word the VADA testing was there, didn't Billy Joe's team then notify VADA, okay, we're taking this substance, but it's legal in the UK, but we're letting you know in advance? Or did it just happen out of thin air?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure of that. I will have to look that up. I think they did, but I'm not completely 100% sure.
Saunders was initially being tested by UCAD. As I mentioned, the clause to initiate VADA was only affected by Eddie Hearn, so they had to change the whole drug testing protocol. But from my understanding, it was disclosed to UCAD. It was on his submissions to them. I'm not sure about VADA though.
I think we'll have that be the last word, because we still got one more news story here, and then a bunch of fights to talk about. Let's get to this ridiculous.
Mike, unfortunately, I've got to go. I've got an early meeting tomorrow, as I mentioned, so I've got to try and get a little bit of shut-eye.
Okay, quickly.
That meeting in a few hours.
Okay, quickly, guys. For those who want to talk boxing or anything else, would you let the folks know where they can find you?
yeah, thanks, Mike. Corruption in Boxing, all platforms, YouTube specifically over here as well.
And thanks for joining us on the show, Gus. I hope to have you back next week. I go to you, Daniel and Gail. This goes into the ridiculous category. I'm not even going to try to do a good job of setting this up. Listen, news broke that Manny Pacquiao signed a deal with Al Heyman. Today, Pacquiao announced that he's going to fight Adrian Broner in January. My issue is, I'm not mad at the fact that Pacquiao signed with Heyman. However, I am annoyed that he's going to fight Broner. Why? Because I don't understand why Adrian Broner is being rewarded with this kind of a fight and this kind of payday. What did he do to deserve it?
Well, in a lot of these fights, you have a hero and a villain. And there isn't anybody in boxing I can think of right now. In fact, this would be a fun exercise among the three of us. But let's start here. Can you really think of a bigger villain in boxing right now than Adrian Broner? A guy so universally disliked that everyone will tune in to see him get his ass whooped? Wouldn't you, who among us wouldn't like to see him get his butt kicked, especially by somebody like Pacquiao? It's a brilliant idea. Did he deserve it? No. But he's playing a role written for him. It's perfect casting. He fits it. It's makeable. Honestly, in the most twisted sense possible, it makes sense, and it'll draw eyeballs. It will draw eyeballs. So this is taking a page out of the very commercially successful book of other entertainment-based combat sports like wrestling. You know, where there are guys, hey, their job is to play the villain, and it works really well. You know, for one fight here, that's what they're going to do. I tell you, it will draw an audience. It's twisted genius. We can all deny, you know, that we'll watch, we'll boycott. I don't want to see that nonsense. Forget it. We're all going to be tuned in. What are we kidding ourselves? And I completely admit it. I'd love to see him get a beat down. I would watch it for that reason alone.
Yeah, as twisted as it is, I guess. That doesn't necessarily mean I like it.
You know what, there are a lot of things that we do that we hate ourselves for. You know, you get a junk food Jones and you indulge it, and at the moment it feels great. And later you say, you know, that was really stupid. I shouldn't have done that. And you know what? We all might hate ourselves in the morning for watching this fight the night before. We'll watch it anyway. We all know it.
Your reaction to this, Daniel?
If we're gonna bring wrestling to this, I'm not gonna compare Adrian Broner to Tommaso Ciampa, and I'm not now, because all credit to Tommaso, that man plays a villain role better than anybody right now.
Well, he does live the dream, doesn't he? He does.
He does. Like, literally. Watch his Twitter account. People like, if you're a wrestling fan and if you're not following Tommaso Ciampa, follow Tommaso Ciampa. He does some weird things with his memes. But going back to this fuckery, first of all, it's been known pretty much for years that Al Heyman has favorites. He has people that's going to give opportunity to again and again and again and again. Danny Garcia is one of those people. Leo Santa Cruz is one of those people. And Adrian Broner is one of those people. We don't know what it is, but he's one of Al Heyman's favorites. So he's going to get given an opportunity now. The Pacquiao fight, there's no incentive for me to watch it. There's really, really none. Like, if I want to see something that's really bad of a car wreck, I'll watch a car wreck film. But this doesn't do anything. Like what? This doesn't do anything. Okay, Pacquiao, you get to beat up a guy that was supposed to be the next Floyd, but then with sheer buffoonery took himself out of that conversation. And you have nothing to gain from it. The only thing that Pacquiao gains from signing with Al Heyman is now the fight with Keith Thurman can actually be made because he has that regular title, but he technically is Keith Thurman's mandatory. So that fight could be made, or they could just, or Keith Thurman could just say no, then he could be given the full WBA belt because
that would be so much like Thurman to sit there all this long and all these fighters calling him out and he does nothing. But yet he jumps at the opportunity to fight Pacquiao, basically for the money.
Would you be surprised at this point? No.
It makes sense. Think about how much sense that makes for both of them to cash out on a big money fight. Because whatever passion they had for the sport as athletes, and they clearly both did for many years, I don't see much of that right now. Pacquiao's fighting for a paycheck. Has anybody found Keith Thurman yet? Have we checked in the chat room? Anybody spotted him on the streets of Tijuana or Nepal or who knows where?
No, well, Clearwater, he still lives in Clearwater, I think. And Clearwater, Florida is not exactly a place where you can find people pretty easily.
Yeah, well, we know why people disappear down to Florida, and that's another story we could talk about. But yeah, weird. I mean, you see a weird as hell story on the news, and they don't tell you what state, and you think, I wonder where that is, Florida.
True, but I do want to have some sympathy for Florida because for those who suffered from Hurricane Michael, I just want to put that as official.
You know, and I do not count the Panhandle. I'm counting the crazy full peninsula of Florida. In any event, you know, the pieces all fall into place. We don't have to like it. But yeah, you have Pacquiao fight Broner. He kicks his ass. Everybody is happy for Manny. He kicks his ass, and everybody's happy that Broner got his ass kicked. And then Pacquiao and Thurman have a big name fight. They get a big paycheck. Neither of them is completely committed to continuing after that point. So hell, cash it out. See what happens. One of them can ride off into the sunset if he feels like it, or for that matter, both of them can. Manny's just biding his time until he runs for president of the Philippines, and he can't run until he's 42 years old. So there we are. He's going to keep messing around, training with Boo Boy and taking fights and going wherever people will pay him to show up.
You mean Boo Boy who's posing as a trainer?
Yeah, right. I mean, come on, it's just ridiculous. And the truth is, a trainer at this point really only exists to speak truth to Pacquiao and, you know, tell him what he needs to hear instead of being one of his sugarcoating it followers. That's the problem. You know, there isn't anyone around Pacquiao right now who can set him straight and tell him the things he doesn't want to hear, unfortunately. And I'm not sure that even Freddie was doing that in the last few years.
Oh, no.
So
you can tell that Freddie wasn't. You can tell that Freddie wasn't.
No. He needs to have someone in there who can kick his ass and tell him, you know, which end is up, you know, without regard to worrying whether he makes him angry or upset or not. I mean, I'd like to see him, you know, get a full, you know, lecture from the likes of Anatoly Lomachenko. I think Papa Lomachenko would have him crying. Well, but hey, if anybody, I suppose, has earned the right to manage himself, you know, it's Manny. Whatever we think of him now, he, for so many years, had been nothing but good for boxing. So,
yeah,
I give him a bit of a pass, just a bit, just the tiniest bit.
Well, if it's, there's not going to be a person that is going to beat him. The closest person probably in that circle right now is Donaire Sr. And
Right.
obviously, Darnell Sr. right now is focused on his son, getting ready for the World Boxing Super Series. The thing, unfortunately, that makes it a very interesting point into that sense is when it comes to Manny, is what type of money is he going to be? Is he going to be the person that is going to carry what remains of what pay-per-view has been for the past 30 years? Now that Canelo is going to fight in the DAZN, it's not going to be the DAZN pay-per-view. So is he going to be the last person to really carry that mantle of what pay-per-view has been for the past 30 years? Because that's probably going to be that fight with Adrian Broner is going to be a pay-per-view fight. No matter how much disgust it'll fill us when it gets announced, it'll still be a pay-per-view fight. Keith Thurman, it'll automatically be a pay-per-view fight just because it's Manny. The problem is going to be, though, is just as how much Manny has people in his boxing circle that are not going to tell him the truth. It's even worse in his wider circle of people that work with him in the government, people that work with him through his various charity endeavors. They're not going to tell him the truth. So he's in a situation where he's only hearing what he wants to hear, and this could land in a bad situation because what if somehow, some way, this leads to Pacquiao Spence? Would you, in all good conscience, watch Pacquiao Spence at this stage?
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
Without a guilty conscience?
Yeah, actually I would. Yes. That's a changing of the guard fight. We all think we know what would happen, but you know, it isn't Garcia versus Rod Salka. You know,
No.
We're not there, are we? No, of course not.
No.
I'm not sure why we wouldn't watch a fight like this.
No, it means to watch it, but it'll probably leave a bad taste in people's mouth if Manny just slowly starts deteriorating as this goes on. And let's say a Spence still ascends.
Could it leave a worse taste than the fight with Floyd?
Yeah.
I don't think so. Really?
Yeah.
Well, there's two different levels of disgust in this when it comes to it. The fight with Floyd, just the whole spectacle and the fact that the injury was never announced until after the fight, that's a level of disgust. This other fight,
well, if we're buying that story, yes.
Yeah. Now that's the whole thing.
The problem is Manny Floyd, you knew all along that Floyd was going to win in outboxing. Manny Spence, the problem is you fear for the possibility of Manny really getting hurt.
Yeah.
Really hurt.
And at this,
we've seen that happen.
We've seen it happen, yes.
We've seen it happen.
I mean, look, the difference is, say with Marquez, he just basically got hit with one shot coming in. The fear is Spence could really beat him up and beat him up bad until he finally ends it. It would be more physically, it would be even worse.
I do agree with that. It would be very important to put the fight in the right venue with the right referee. And Michael, that ain't Texas, okay? That is not in Texas. You need quality personnel working that fight who are very alert to exactly what you're talking about. I'm okay with it. And if they can pass their physicals. They aren't in Texas. You know, they're in with a commission that knows what they're doing. And they've got an eagle-eyed referee who's very protective. I'm good with it.
Let's move on and talk about some other fights because the show is running a little bit long. We're close to the 2-hour mark. What I'm going to do is, because there's so many fights this weekend, I'm going to split these fights up. and have one person talk about one fight, another person talk about another fight. I'm going to start with you, Daniel. In Vegas, Rody Murata, who's being rumored to possibly fight Triple G sometime 2019. He's defending his version of the middleweight title against Rob Brant. Quickly, your thoughts on that?
That's going to be an interesting fight to me because Brant is a pretty good fighter. Like obviously, he didn't show it in the World Boxing Super Series, but he was in a weight class that he probably didn't belong to. So this is a pretty decent fight. We know Murata has an Olympic pedigree, and this is going to be a showcase fight because Golovkin is going to be ringside for this fight. So this is a good showcase for him because not only does it put eyes on Murata for a fight with Golovkin, we have to remember, like I said, like how Manny technically is the mandatory run for Keith Thurman. Murata right now is technically the WBA mandatory for Canelo.
Demetrius Andrade mentioned that the fight with Billy Joe Saunders is off. Well, he's going to be fighting. I'll just say Walter K because I'm not going to try to pronounce his last name. I will butcher it. Don't know much about him other than the fact that he can punch Gale. If you see more video of him, please commentary on his style and how do you think he will do against Andrade? Are you there, Gail?
I am. Pardon me for not opening the mic. I have not seen video of him, but he is undefeated. He does seem to have some power. You know, it's going to be one of those question mark sort of fights. And frequently they go exactly the way we think. And this is a guy who has fought, gotten that record built up against limited opposition. That's certainly possible. Is it also possible that we get a surprise that this is a guy who's, got the chance of a lifetime and maybe he maximizes it? It's hard to say. I think that's what makes it sort of an interesting fight. Fight's going to be held in Boston. Whether he draws a crowd from New York, this is a fighter from Namibia. Is he going to be an Ndongo or is he going to be a Dogbe? I mean, it's really hard to tell. So I'm intrigued by this. He's 17-0 with 15 knockouts. However, all of his fights to date have been in Africa somewhere. He's fought quite a bit in Ghana as well as in Namibia. We know that you got a lot of really tough competition in Ghana. So I'm intrigued by it. As if you've got to make a fight at the last minute, you could do a whole lot worse. I'm very curious to see this fight.
On the undercard of Andrade and Walter K, Tevin Farmer coming off of his title win against Billy Dib in Australia earlier this summer, making his first title defense against a guy by the name of Tennyson, Daniel. Your thoughts on Tennyson? How much of a chance do you give him against the slick boxing Tevin Farmer?
This is where the IBF thing comes in. I have not heard much of Tennyson, but from what I have heard, this is probably going to be a pretty easy fight for Farmer to go through. And he's kind of earned. Like I said, he's kind of earned the right to probably have an easy fight after, obviously, like I said, being robbed of the title he should have been had for close to a year by now. And it's going to be an interesting show because it's probably going to be a showcase for him. And it's probably going to be a pretty interesting showcase because we know the fight that he wants. It's a fight that pretty much everybody within that circle, within that area, Philadelphia, Baltimore wants. And that's him and Tank. He's going to try to show out a little bit and try to poke the bear with Tank because IBF champion. Technically, I think Tank has a WBA belt.
Yeah.
So they can technically say it'll be a title unification. with two people that really don't like each other. So it's probably going to be a good showcase for him. And like I said, we know what's on his mind, but that also could lead bad things because you never want to look past your opponent.
Eddie Hearn's prized women's fighter is Katie Taylor, current WBO IBF lightweight champion. She's coming stateside on the undercard of Andrade, Walter K, Tevin Farmer, Tennyson. This is a DAZN card, by the way, second place in Boston. She's going to defend her titles against Cindy Serrano. I'm looking at this Gail, and Serrano is a tough fighter, but I just don't think she has enough to compete with the likes of Katie Taylor.
I agree. Serrano is a great fighter. Like a lot of women over the last decade, you know, it's very hard for them to find quality opposition over a period of time. And that's no fault of hers. In the women's game, you know, to date, there just has been not the critical mass of folks out there for them to fight. So she's going to come up against someone with an incredible pedigree, fresher, busier, improving every fight, and she was already damn good. It's going to be a fun fight to watch. I do expect Taylor to win. I think she'll have to work a little harder. I'm pretty sure Serrano will give her a much tougher fight, but she's simply too skilled. Her fundamentals are so good. And if the women had 3-minute rounds, Taylor would be scoring a lot more knockouts. Very similar to what I think of Michaela Mayer as well. So I look forward to seeing these ladies in the ring.
The last 3 fights we just previewed, Andrade, Walter K, Farmer, Tennyson, Katie Taylor, Serrano, that's part of a DAZN card that's taking place in Boston. We're going to have 2 DAZN cards happening this weekend. The second one's going to happen in Orlando, Florida. I want to focus on the main event. Last fight, we're going to recap, Daniel. Another quarterfinal of the World Boxing Super Series Bantamweight Tournament. Fight I really like, Emmanuel Rodriguez defending his IBF belt against mandatory challenger Jason Maloney. For me, this is a 50-50, 60-40 fight. These both have equal amount of skills. They both can do a lot in the ring. Both can box. Both can fight on the outside, inside. And they both bring a bit of power to the game. Very, very intriguing matchup to me. Daniel, your thoughts?
Yeah, it's 50-50, and as close to 50-50 as you're going to get.
Yeah.
Because they have almost the same level of experience. Rodriguez is 18-0, 12 knockouts. Maloney 17-0, 14 knockouts.
And they fight very much the same way.
Mm-hmm. So it's going to be a very, very good fight to watch. I think Rodriguez probably will pull it out a little bit because he has a lot more to gain from it. But obviously Maloney wants that belt. But we have to mention also like Rodriguez is going to fight in an area that is going to be very, very friendly to him. So he's going to be motivated because that area, where it's Puerto Rico, where there's Cuba, that area, the Caribbean in general, wants to find their next star. And they keep trying to find who's going to be their next star. This is Rodriguez's chance to try to prove he could be that star in the Caribbean. So there's a lot of riding for him, and I do think that'll help him push it out.
And I think I'm going to lean toward Rodriguez, but not very confidently. I think Maloney is that good. And I'm going to make a prediction right now. I think this is going to be the best fight of the entire weekend. I think we're going to start shutting the show down on that note. I want to thank Gus for joining us in the show earlier. I want to thank those who joined us in the chat. I see EJ Boxing Live. He's in the chat. Shout out to him. Fink, Covert Operative. Thank everybody there for joining us during the live YouTube chat. Gail from Communities Digital News, for those who want to talk the sweet science, Game of Thrones, Dancing with the Stars, small business advice. Let the folks know where they can find you.
You can find me, as always, on Communities Digital News, which is COM, C-O-M-M, Digi, D-I-G-I, News, comdiginews.com. I will be ringside in Las Vegas for the Murata Brant card. So if you are there, come see me and say hello.
Indeed, indeed. Daniel from the Inscriber. I know this was a bit tough because your Miami Heat was playing as well this evening. For those who want to talk the sweet science, as well as the NBA, especially when it comes to the Miami Heat, let the folks know where they can find you.
Yes, folks, you can find me on Twitter, Ruckus99. I actually did, like I said, I did a podcast yesterday with the good folks before Boxing News. Within hours, it should be up on their site shortly and up on SoundCloud. And first of all, shout out to Kelly Olynyk. Nice putback to win the game against the Washington Wizards. Another shout out just for letting the guy that wore the taco suit, just for letting Deontay Wilder get close enough before he get hit.
Oh gosh. Did he really break his jaw?
No, it came out that he was fine. It was probably funnier when they found out he broke his jaw, but this was an ESPN Deportes thing. He obviously got goaded into it, and it's probably still the best part was watching Wilder do that about face. A military about face.
that was hilarious. That's one of the things I've seen boxing wise all weekend long. If you like what you've heard this evening, click that like button on YouTube, click that subscribe button, subscribe to us on iTunes and SoundCloud. For those who want to talk boxing, fitness, music with me, you know what it is. Brother JR at Brother JR76 on Twitter. As I said to begin the show, if you want to find out all things regarding Pound for Pound Boxing Report, blog page is the place to go, 2P4P Boxing Report. .wordpress.com. Check the right of the page. You'll find links to multiple pages on social media, as well as links to where to listen to us on just about everywhere that has podcasts, minus Spotify, excuse me. On the next episode, we will do a recap of the two DAZN Andrade and Walter K, Farmer Tennyson, Katie. We'll do a recap of the ESPN Plus card, Murata and Brant card in Orlando, Emmanuel Rodriguez, Jason Maloney, and one of the final boxing shows on HBO as fight Daniel Jacobs. Machado, he's going to defend his junior lightweight belt against Evans. Heather Hardy, she's going to fight on that card as well. And who else? Quarterfinal of the Super Series tournament that's happening in New Orleans on the DAZN card for Rancic and Yijic. So we'll be talking about those fights. For Gus, who joined us on the show earlier, for Gail from Communities Digital News, Daniel from the Inscriber, this has been episode 226, Pound for Pound Box Report. Want to give a thoughts and prayers to those who was in the path, who really suffered down in the Florida Panhandle as a result of Hurricane Michael. Again, thoughts and prayers to them. A lot of devastation in that area of the country. Again, if you like what you've heard, subscribe, hit that like button. YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes. Show Pound for Pound Box Report some love. So for Gail from Communities Digital News, Daniel from the Inscriber, I'm your host, Michael, episode 226 of Pound for Pound Box Report. Everybody have a good evening. Good night.
Night, everybody.